this edition of Sightings.
All I could see was a bright light straight above me.
And there was 3 of them to the west, right on the horizon.
In Idaho, a series of UFO sightings has residents terrified.
I feel uncomfortable in the dark because there's something out there.
Then, at Hollywood's Knickerbocker Hotel, past tragedies replay nightly like an old movie.
Some sort of psychic scar exists, so powerful that it would remain even to this day.
Plus, doctors gave up hope, but this man emerged from a coma despite the odds.
It was the neurologist's opinion that there was no hope.
Later, if they had followed an ancient Chinese philosophy, would Bruce Lee and his son be alive today?
Bruce Lee laughed it off. He refused to take it seriously.
And a sightings update. In Mexico City, an airline pilot says he barely avoided a mid-air collision with an extraterrestrial craft.
Welcome to Sightings. I'm Tim White. Most UFOs, as many as 80% according to our experts, can be dismissed as military aircraft misidentified by civilian eyes. But sightings over populated areas can't be written off in this way. The Air Force says that they don't fly highly experimental craft over populated areas. So now, a rash of sightings between Spokane, Washington and Coeur d'Alene, Idaho have people wondering, just what are they?
Over there, at the top of those trees over there was a bright light shining.
And it was like they were putting on a laser show. They turn up on their side and you see like laser beams of light.
I called the Post Falls Police Department, and they came out, and this gentleman was a sergeant. He asked us what we thought we were looking at. At this point, I handed him my binoculars, and I said, look for yourself. He immediately reported the same thing that we were seeing.
Beginning on March 2nd, 1994, people in the small town of Post Falls, Idaho started seeing UFOs.
Post Falls Police.
Emergency Communications Officer Chris Euler took the first UFO calls.
Well, it was on graveyard shift, and we had reports that people were seeing twinkling lights. They were kind of nervous and said there's something floating in the sky. Well, the first thing we did was run outside and look and see if there really was something in the sky, and there was a white light, and there were colored lights kind of rotating around it. There was red, green, blue, purple, and a gold colored light, and they were flashing systematically.
That night, the police switchboard received several calls of concern. Post Falls wanted answers, but the authorities were stumped. They began referring many of the callers to Jerry Rowles.
I'm a retired Lieutenant Colonel of the Air Force, and I am the Assistant State Director for Washington State of the Mutual UFO Network. We use scientific methodology in our field investigative procedures. We also interface with various other organizations to include astronomical societies, the Air Force, Sheriff's Department, United States Meteorological offices, and the Federal Aviation Agency to try to rule out what the objects may not be. We've recently had an increased number of reports here in the area of Spokane, Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls area, and the people have been reporting a nebulous type of lights that are observed in the night sky.
It was very shallow, like 2 shallow saucers placed together. The only lights on it were on the bottom. There was the big one that I keep mentioning. In the center was a recessed amber light.
And there was 3 of them to the west, right on the horizon. And then we saw an aircraft coming in from the east. And at that point, we happened to glance back to the west, and these 3 just took off, went straight up, and the lights went out. The aircraft went on by, and we discussed this. We stood and watched it for a little while, and pretty soon the lights come back down. The 3 of them come right back down to the same position.
This amateur videotape, exclusive to Sightings, is the only known visual record of one of the UFOs. The object's brilliance and unusual flight pattern does seem to rule out the possibility that it is a celestial body or a conventional aircraft. Sightings of bright UFOs continue to be reported in Post Falls and surrounding communities. In nearby Newman Lake, Washington, one man had a frightening encounter on a lonely stretch of road.
2 nights ago, I was driving down West Newman Lake Road a little before midnight. There's a field there. I usually stop and look at the deer. All of a sudden, a blinding white light came from directly above me. I slowed down, opened the door, looked up. All I could see was a bright, round, incredibly bright light straight above me. I looked at it for maybe 9 or 10 seconds, couldn't figure out what it was. Immediately became incredibly frightened, slammed my door, and I drove away as fast as I could. As soon as I went to leave, the light was gone. It vanished. As I was driving away, I was probably as scared as I've ever been in my life. I headed straight to a house not too far away down the road, a friend's house.
I could tell he was very serious because he was so scared. He was just, I've never seen him shake. He actually was just shaking. And very pale, no color to him.
I was in the military and I've been on bases. This light was not something I've ever seen on any aircraft. It would have to be something incredibly large. I can't imagine, the light would have to be 50 yards across to do this. It was huge, huge.
Later that night, local police put Dean in contact with Jerry Rowles. Rowles immediately called each of his considerable military and civilian contacts about the event.
And I have pretty well ruled out any type of encounter with an aircraft. Based on the interface that I had with the Air Force, I can only say what the object was not.
According to Rowles, it was not a commercial airliner or conventional military aircraft. But many residents in the area think they know what Dean encountered, the same type of UFO they themselves have witnessed. The same type of UFO captured on videotape just days before.
If somebody told me the same story, I would say, yeah, sure, whatever, you know, I don't believe you. You have to be there. Ever since what happened 2 nights ago, obviously I don't stop in the same place. I feel uncomfortable in the dark, not because I think there's a monster out there waiting for me, but because there's something out there, and I didn't see what was behind the light.
A disturbing new development has just been reported by sources in Idaho. The sightings are continuing, and where UFOs have been observed, ranchers are reporting cattle mutilations. Sightings is conducting an ongoing investigation in the connection between these new sightings and the suspicious mutilations.
Next, a healer reaches out to coma patients with miraculous results.
I knew then that Peter was making an effort to recover.
Deciding when to remove life support from a loved one is an agonizing decision for any family. Roger Laborde is a self-styled healer who claims he has the power to communicate with comatose patients and find out what they want. Airborne reporter and pilot Peter Peelgrain was Denver's eye in the sky. But on February 12, 1992, Peter's career came to a crashing halt.
His engine failed, and he didn't have anywhere to go but the reservoir. So it took them 45 minutes to actually effect a rescue, which they finally did with a rescue boat. And Peter had lost consciousness and was floating on top of the water. They airlifted him to the hospital. He didn't have a heartbeat for the first 45 minutes. When he got to the hospital, he went into surgery, and the doctors came out and told me that he'd been clinically dead, and he made it through the surgery and was in a deep coma.
Peter was a boisterous transplant from Australia, a family man, a fun-loving, joyous father of 5. It was hard to imagine that a man so full of life could now be on the brink of death, but he was.
The doctors told me that with the results of the EEG that the prognosis was getting worse, and that I needed to start thinking about making a decision to either end his life or not.
Her decision was to put her husband's life in the hands of a man she had never met, Roger Laborde.
I can't explain to you just exactly what I do, because in the 4 separate cases that I've worked with, they've all been different.
Roger Laborde claims that he has used a unique psychic gift to successfully communicate with 4 separate coma patients.
All 4 instances, they were going to pull life support and let them die, and it was the neurologist's opinion that there was no hope.
Roger arrived about 10:30, and I said, well, why don't you get some rest, and we'll go over in a few hours. And be with him. And he said, no, it's really better if I start now. Then Roger put his hands on Peter and Peter's arm, and I laid my hand on his other arm. And all of a sudden I got this really strange sensation of sort of electricity in my stomach, and I just thought, I can't deal with this right now. I can't. And so I said, well, I'm going to leave you alone, and I'm going to go back and try and get some sleep.
I sat in the room for 4 hours, doing my best to blank my mind. What came to me was to go over and to start talking to Peter about walking through a field of flowers. And I described to him what the flowers looked like, the smells. I described the surroundings, and then I said to him, I said, you know, Peter, when you're walking through a field of flowers, you have to move your feet. And that's when he began to move his feet under the sheet. I knew then that Peter was making an effort to recover and make contact.
The doctor came in that night and asked me if I'd made a decision, and I said, well, Peter's made a decision, and I think he's coming back.
For the next 4 weeks, Laborde continued to communicate with Peter through directed visualization. Peter seemed to be responding.
When you have someone who is not able to move and someone who's not able to speak, and their focus of attention is elsewhere, to communicate with them, you have to be creative. You have to figure out some other way to communicate with them. My discovery was that there's a way of doing that energetically. What I was saying to him, which I did verbalize to him later, that I was there to help him to stay or go, but I needed to know what he was going to do.
But the 4 successful cases Laborde has worked on do not convince the medical community that his technique works.
If someone's deeply unresponsive by nature of the definition, they don't respond to my questioning, nor to the nurses, nor other people.
Dr. Philip Yarnell is one of Denver's leading neurologists. He believes that coma patients are neither physically nor mentally capable of responding to communication of any kind.
We think that they have hearing, in that the transmission of sounds from clicks in the ears to recordings on the brain are often intact. Now, whether they hear as we hear, so that we interpret sounds as voices or as the messages of loved ones, that we can't tell.
But some recovered coma patients claim that their personal experience has been just the opposite.
I had the experience that's classically described as the near-death experience, where you see the blinding white lights and feel the overwhelming sense of compassion and forgiveness and peacefulness.
In 1991, Mary Kay Blakely fell into a diabetes-induced coma. For 9 days, she lay in a New York City hospital while friends and family kept a round-the-clock vigil. Unlike most coma patients, Mary Kay claims that she can recall the thoughts and feelings she experienced while she was comatose. She's chronicled her ordeal in this book, Wake Me When It's Over.
I imagined that I was in a prison and I spent the whole 9 days trying to figure out what I had done to land there. You lose all measurements of time. There's no day, there's no night. I felt no pain, I felt no air, I felt no breath. I felt no heartbeat. It was very relaxing. You wanted to stay in that state forever.
Mary Kay gives a lot of the credit for her recovery to her sister, who maintained a continuous one-way dialogue at Mary Kay's bedside.
She thought it was her personal mission to give me some reason to come back. So maybe it made a difference.
Dr. Arnold Mindell is a clinical psychologist who has spent 20 years studying the coma state. He challenges the mainstream belief that deep coma is synonymous with brain death. He believes it is simply an altered state of consciousness.
Years from today, people are going to look back on this period of medicine and dealing with comatose states, and they are going to say, my God, wow, we were making decisions to pull the tubes on this character without asking her or him, or not even trying to communicate with them. The goal is not to get the person to awake, and the goal is not to get the person to die. The goal is to follow nature.
I don't think that Roger is a prophet or a saint. I think that he has found a calm and a knowledge and a wisdom of the heart. He helped us. There's no question of that.
Never give up. Only until the individual in the coma states that they want to go, then I would say be responsible and follow their wishes and pull life support. But don't give up hope.
Every day he gets a little bit better, but the improvements are in millimeters. You know, they're not in feet or yards. They're tiny, and everyone is a hard-fought victory. And he amazes me how hard he works for things. But his sense of humor is intact. He still comes up with some great one-liners, and you know, he's still here, and he's still part of us, and still here for us to love, and to love us.
Healers like Roger Laborde and Dr. Arnold Mendel want you to know that they do not consider themselves an alternative to licensed physicians. Credible healers work with medical doctors to provide additional support. No one should rely on psychic healing without consulting their family doctor first.
Next, if an ancient Chinese tradition is not followed, believers say they could face disaster.
Those who refuse to take it seriously do so at their own peril.
Most people believe that good luck comes by chance. You either have it or you don't. There are, of course, all kinds of superstitious methods to improve good luck, like a pinch of salt over the left, not the right shoulder, for example. But the Chinese believe that there is a scientific system for improving good luck. It's called feng shui. It is the belief that the perfect harmony in nature must be respected and reflected in what humankind creates.
It's absolutely not something you can see. It absolutely has to do with the forces of yin and yang being male and female, or light and dark, or good or bad. And there's an intersection of these forces in any one location, according to the theory. And because of that, there are good locations and there are bad locations.
Feng Shui teaches that a spiritual energy called qi flows freely in nature, but man-made structures like buildings or even tombstones can interrupt that vital flow and cause bad luck, disharmony, even death. Martial arts star Bruce Lee did not heed Feng Shui advisors when he built his Hong Kong estate and when he chose a burial site for his father. Both Bruce Lee and his son Brandon died tragically before their time.
Bruce Lee lived in a house in Hong Kong in 1972-73, just prior to his death, that one of the Chinese feng shui experts had come and told him this house was a very bad location, that he shouldn't live here, and Bruce Lee laughed it off. He refused to take it seriously. He had basically said, I don't care about the old way, I have a new way, I'm going to show you there's a better way.
Turning his back on the old ways may have helped Bruce Lee cross over into international fame, but feng shui experts believe it also disrupted the flow of qi around him and contributed to his death by cerebral edema.
Everybody is governed by qi, so we say qi is a real me. The body's metabolism is only a shell, and when the qi is very smooth, then he will have a healthy body.
Feng Shui master Yun Lin believes illness is caused by bad qi. He claims to have healed many people by instructing them in methods that improve the flow of qi. Mimi Tsai was given a number of suggestions about the placement of objects in her home to counter the effects of an abdominal tumor she'd carried around for 19 years.
That time, I just want to die. I don't want to live. It's very hard for me. But my mother, she's worried about me very much. She tried to call Professor Lin, and luckily I talked to him on the phone.
I hope to use my qi over the phone. I imagine the light of 10,000 Buddhas shining on her.
And he told me, don't worry. In 2 weeks, you will find a person who can help you.
2 weeks after implementing Professor Lin's feng shui principles, Mimi Tsai met Stanford Medical Center surgeon Dr. Harry Oberholman.
When I first saw Mimi Tsai, she had a very large abdominal tumor, which filled her entire abdomen and pelvis. The tumor weighed, I believe it was in excess of 3 kilograms, which is about 6.5 pounds.
Using the combined forces of Western medicine and Eastern philosophy, Mimi is once again healthy.
I recovered very fast. Even the nurse, the doctor, they think, oh, it's a miracle. How can you recover so fast?
Professor Lin also works with the terminally ill. William Whitson recalls consulting Professor Lin on behalf of a colleague at the Library of Congress.
This one case involved a member of my staff in the Library of Congress whose father had a apparently incurable neurological disease. The paralysis had begun at his feet and had gradually gone all the way to his waist, and he was in a wheelchair. So I introduced the young man to Professor Lin, and Professor Lin looked at him and he said, "Your father has lived in this house for 50 years, is that right?" And the young man was surprised and said, "Yes." Professor Lin said, "Now that I know this, the way to solve his problem is to take an 8-foot pole, sink it 2 feet in the ground behind the house about midway on the long axis, and he will be all right." The moment that pole was sunk into the ground, he began healing, and he's all right today. He's out playing golf.
All of your bad luck have been removed. All of your bad luck, your illness, negative forces, all have been removed.
The power of feng shui is intangible. It cannot be isolated in a laboratory or a test tube. We have only the personal experiences of those who have felt its power as proof of its existence.
When Brandon Lee died, there was information that came out at the location of the grave of Bruce Lee's father, Brandon Lee's grandfather, was a very bad omen for the family. He's buried on a hillside in a cemetery above Hong Kong. That an expert in feng shui had come to them and said, "This is a very bad location, and it's going to cause your family great difficulty."
But the Lee family did not heed the warning. The grave was never moved. Feng shui experts are convinced that ignoring their warning killed Bruce and Brandon Lee, and that heeding feng shui principles spared the life of Mimi Tsai.
There's something there, and those who refuse to take it seriously do so at their own peril.
If you'd like more prosperity, health, and good fortune, feng shui experts have this suggestion. Hang metal wind chimes just outside your front door. The chimes will help direct the flow of qi, or good energy, into your home every time the door is opened.
Coming up, a psychic believes she knows what happened to a missing boy.
He's been moved twice.
Then, do Hollywood tragedies haunt this landmark? And later, a pilot in Mexico City barely avoids a collision with an extraterrestrial craft.
Every year in this country, more than 1 million children disappear. Many run away. Some are taken by a non-custodial parent. And a few just seem to vanish without a trace. 8-year-old Danny Hohenstein vanished in 1992. His mother has never given up hope of finding him, and through her recent contact with psychic Greta Alexander, she has reason to believe that Danny is alive.
Danny was a real happy boy. He was very friendly to people. He wasn't really scared, I don't think, around here.
Danny Hohenstein's mother speaks about her only son in the past tense because she has not seen, heard, or touched him since 1992, when Danny vanished.
I immediately ordered what we call an all call, which sent out all our search and rescue available units to the area.
The tiny town of Paradise in Butte County, California, had never had a missing child case like this one. Law enforcement officials and search and rescue personnel marshaled every resource they could to find Danny.
We had search and rescue from as far as the Oregon border, Nevada, and down below the Bay Area, throughout California. National Guards assisted. We had dogs, we had Highway Patrol, FBI. Everybody assisted in this whole program.
Investigator Vern Kelch headed up the search, concentrating his forces in the canyon bordering Danny's house.
Most of us assumed that he was probably in the canyon, but we were still going to work it from both angles.
But from the beginning, Jackie had a gut feeling that her son was not in that canyon.
I thought he was kidnapped, that somebody come and picked him up off the road, because I never believed that he would go into the canyon.
Every search you could possibly imagine, including floor units from which is a heat-seeking device, without any trace at all in the canyon.
The first significant clue in the case didn't come until 3 days later. A neighbor's puppy was discovered near the canyon.
The people in the neighborhood told me after Danny disappeared that they'd seen him with the dog earlier that day.
The puppy was found, but Danny was not. To this day, no one knows whether Danny Hohenstein is alive or dead.
Where's Danny is the bottom line.
The search has been ongoing for over 2 years. Law enforcement agencies, search and rescue teams, family, friends, and compassionate strangers have all combed the area. But now the search turns in a new direction, to a farmhouse in Delavan, Illinois, and psychic Greta Alexander.
I consider that the ability that had been laid in my heart is a gift and a talent, and it comes through me, not from me.
Where detective work has so far failed, Greta believes her psychic ability will succeed. She concentrates on a palm print provided by Danny's mother.
The hand is a servant of the brain, and when you look at the hands, you will find tiny little lines, and it's like a road map, and every line tells a story. It looks to me like that he is still alive, and it looks to me like that he's been moved twice, and that there's a third move coming up, and that move is what's going to be bringing them back together.
After studying the print, Greta revealed startling facts about the case that only police and Jackie knew about. She was then allowed to touch a piece of Danny's clothing.
I feel like I am Danny, and I feel like I was playing out. And the next thing I know, I hear the dog barking. And I feel like that there's a gentleman here, and he's got the dog, you know, and he's holding the dog, and he's telling Danny to come and help him. And the next thing I know is it's either like a Suburban or a truck of some type, but it's like an enclosed vehicle here. And then the next thing that I know is I'm being transported or taken from one place to another, and the dog does not go. The person that accosted this young man does wear a uniform. He has a dress code or something here that he wears in his work. I feel money exchanged. I'd like to talk to the officer, please.
Greta Alexander asked to be put in direct contact with investigator Vern Kelch.
Well, first of all, I feel like that I am he.
Are you still living in the area?
No, I have moved. I want to go to Oklahoma. I feel like I've been moved 3 times. I feel like that I am okay. I feel like I'm with other people around me, and that what I thought about my parents is that they are not able to care for me.
And so you're now in Oklahoma, and you're being cared for by somebody there, is that correct?
I am loved. I am loved.
And this is still, you feel, in Oklahoma, is that right?
I feel like there will be a move, and I feel like that when there's a move, then there'll be new news that will be heard.
According to Greta Alexander, this is what happened. Danny was approached by a man he knew. The man was wearing a uniform. He used a black puppy to lure Danny into a pickup truck or van. They drove to Oklahoma, and most importantly, Greta believes Danny is still alive and that he will soon be reunited with his mother.
And how soon do you see this move coming?
It looks like in March there'll be some changes.
When investigator Kelch related the conversation to Jackie, it jarred her memory about an incident that had occurred just before Danny's disappearance.
Danny was very happy with going to school until the last month or so is when he started not wanting to go to school. And now I feel kind of strange about that, since Greta came up with the facet that maybe it was somebody at school that was trying to befriend him and he was scared of it.
I really hope Greta can help us with this case. She's talking to her. She's given me things that should be followed up on and will be followed up on, things that she would have had no way of knowing and that do pertain to the case. And I feel that there is something there, and we do need to follow up on the leads that she has given us.
I just miss all of him, every little bit of him, everything.
Using psychic detective Greta Alexander has been a help and a comfort to Jackie Carter and her family, and we'll update you on the progress of her search. But it is also very important that anyone with information about Danny Hohenstein or other missing children contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
Next, witnesses believe that Hollywood legends who died tragically haunt this hotel.
It's very possible that her spirit is one of those that haunts this area.
Once upon a time, the Knickerbocker Hotel was the toast of Hollywood. Valentino slept there. Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio spent their honeymoon there. And Harriet Houdini conducted rooftop seances trying to contact the spirit of her dead husband. Well, as we know, Harry Houdini never called her back. But some people believe that Rudolph Valentino is still appearing nightly at the Knickerbocker Hotel. Today, the Knickerbocker is quiet and plain, a retirement hotel in the heart of Hollywood. It's a mere shadow of the vibrant, glamorous Mecca it once was. The silver screen's brightest stars adopted the Knickerbocker as their playground. There were parties, romance, and also a darker side. Disappointment, rage, and untimely death have also made their mark on the Knickerbocker Hotel.
So some sort of psychic scar exists, a leftover trace of maybe a murder or suicide or some great trauma that would leave that behind, so powerful that it would remain even to this day.
The psychic scar that Richard Sennett describes can be likened to a ghostly movie, perpetually replaying in the atmosphere of this hotel. Many here claim to have felt its effects.
We were the only ones here. It was about 11 o'clock in the evening, and we were standing over here to get some coffee.
And then all of a sudden the ceiling fan blade blew off.
I swished my head to see Melanie. When I did, just behind her I saw this guy standing in a brown suit, brown hat, arms crossed, looking down the ground. And then the candle broke.
It just exploded.
It cracked.
And broke. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that there was something here that night.
Paranormal investigators believe that locations with a great deal of traumatic history bear the scars of their tragic past on the present. What eyewitnesses describe as a haunting, investigators describe as spiritual residue of an emotional event permanently imprinted on the environment. And the environment here is rich in emotional history, particularly in the hotel's bar and restaurant areas, which have recently been renovated and reopened as the All-Star Cafe.
The Hollywood Knickerbocker has had a lot of history of stars and luminaries. A lot of celebrities have died here.
Since she began working at the All-Star Cafe, Christina Apples has experienced bizarre phenomena she describes as supernatural.
As the months went by, there were little things that I noticed, such as lights flickering off and on occasion, or knocking on the door, which was probably the most frightening thing for me because no one was there. And then there was a recent incident when I was just working here by myself. The front door opened and closed by itself, and it's a heavy door. It can't be just moved by the wind.
I have seen an apparition. It was a man's head floating below the chandelier, and I could see the gold vein of the mirror through his face, so it was transparent, and he had snow white hair.
Are these sightings the physical manifestations of a psychic energy, the so-called psychic scar? And if so, is there a way to make contact with this energy and summon it at will?
There are several areas in this particular building that I think are definitely haunted.
Psychic investigator Richard Sennett believes that dowsing rods will be effective in locating concentrations of energy within the hotel.
To try to discover the root cause of a haunting, I found in many of the cases we've looked into, there is a story of tragedy.
Sennett believes that tragedy leaves permanent vortices of energy in its wake. Locating these areas may be a shortcut to another dimension.
I found in researching haunted sites that dowsing rods can really give some great clues to the areas that are haunted, and also perhaps even give an idea of why these events go on.
His method may appear odd to laymen, but Sennett made several astonishing discoveries.
When I got toward the rear of the building, towards the one storage room, the activity was 10 times greater. was far more urgency and almost a panic in that particular area.
What Sennett did not know is that this area was not always an obscure storage room.
The original entrance from the bar, which is now the All-Star Cafe, coffee house, is over there, the pantry. And Frances Farmer was presumed dragged through from her hotel room through here.
Frances Farmer's star rose quickly in the 1930s. She personified feminine beauty and grace. But in just a few short years, alcoholism and mental illness had taken a devastating toll. When she resisted attempts to institutionalize her, she was forcibly removed from her hotel room.
And this is where Frances Farmer was dragged through nude to be publicly humiliated in front of the guests, and so they could deem her, you know, insane, and then the lobotomy was performed on her.
In fact, it's very possible that her spirit is one of those that haunts this area. A site of such great humiliation could definitely have left behind some unfinished business.
Further into the investigation, Sennett found another paranormal hotspot.
As I was dousing the lobby with the beautiful chandelier, I noticed that directly under it, in the center of the lobby, there seemed to be a great deal of activity. I decided to try to ascertain its shape and size in an attempt to get some kind of an idea of what it might be, some clue.
Each time the dowsing rods crossed, Sennett marked the spot on the lobby floor. Soon, a shape started to emerge.
It seemed to make a large ovoid shape, and I distinctly got the impression of a body. I didn't see a face, but I saw like a person's head. The impression I got was of a man.
D.W. Griffith lived on 10th floor, started many films. One day he was drunk and just dragged himself and collapsed dead underneath the big chandelier in the lobby.
It was a fact that we did not reveal to Sennett until several hours after his investigation in the lobby.
He died right under.
In the lobby? In the lobby. Where we had it? Because if that's the case, that means we've got some proof of a psychic trace being left behind. I think that there is something in that lobby and there's something in this building, at least, as I say, 3 to 4 entities on the site. And I'd like to do further research.
Most of the old hotels and theaters along Hollywood Boulevard are gone now. The few that remain are mere shadows of their former glory. But within their walls, the golden age of Hollywood remains. And in those shadows, stars like Clark Gable, Mae West, and Judy Garland may be taking their final bow.
Next, a sightings update from Mexico City. A commercial airline pilot describes a mid-air collision with a UFO.
We had to have an emergency landing.
Mass sightings of UFOs over Mexico City are still increasing. A sightings investigative team continues to monitor events in Mexico and collect new videotapes of bizarre aircraft. And now a commercial airline pilot, Captain Raimundo Ruano, has agreed to come forward with his own harrowing account of a near miss with a UFO. It was what commercial pilots call a milk run. In this case, a routine short-distance flight from Guadalajara to Mexico City. But in July of 1994, Captain Raimundo Ruano's routine was unexpectedly interrupted.
Estaba en tránsito el tren.
When my landing gear was in transit, barely down, I'm making my turn when I felt a very hard hit. At that moment, I didn't know what it was. I had never felt a hit as strong as this.
Captain Ruano put in an emergency call to the tower. The supervising controller ordered Ruano to fly by the tower for a visual inspection of the aircraft. Because the landing gear appeared to be down and locked, the captain was given clearance for an immediate emergency landing.
Immediately, maintenance checked the airplane and found that the shock absorber was torn off.
It was clear that there had been a collision, but with what?
After I landed the airplane, I contacted radar control, and they told me that at the moment I was making my turn, there were 2 UFOs. I probably crossed my path with theirs, and that's when I declared myself in emergency.
That day was July 28th, It was 9 o'clock when I received many calls. I then called the Tower of Control to tell them there is a big UFO in this area of the city. And they say, thank you very much, and that was it. An hour later, the people from the Tower of Control called us, excited. Where you said it was a UFO, we just have an accident of a DC-9, and we had to have an emergency landing. The pilot is coming, he wants to talk to you.
Journalist Jaime Muson has heard many first-hand accounts from pilots who have had unexplained encounters with UFOs. But Captain Ruano is the first commercial pilot in Mexico willing to risk his professional reputation and publicly state what he experienced at the helm of a DC-9.
In the next 10 days, we have 6 sightings of pilots going, almost landing in Mexico City. They had these sightings.
Air traffic controllers have also made sightings, in the air and on radar. Sightings interviewed 2 controllers at Mexico City Airport. While they refused to speak on camera, they did supply us with this radio transmission between the Mexico City Tower and a commercial airliner. Sightings has uncovered several instances where unidentified craft have posed a serious threat to inbound aircraft. Why is this threat being ignored by aviation officials?
In many ways, they are connected to the FAA in the United States. And that's one reason they are worried, because in your country, this is a difficult matter. This is a very delicate matter.
Well, if I were a pilot, I'm not sure I would want to complicate my life by making a report either.
Aeronautic engineer Richard Haynes has been collecting first-hand accounts of pilot sightings for more than 20 years.
I have commercial cases from almost every country of the world, by the way. Military sightings, test pilot sightings, like the X-15, for instance, and NASA kind of test aircraft, and also private pilots.
Although the Mexican government is aware of the UFO flap active here, their action has been limited.
What we are doing now, the pilots, is to be more attentive in coordination with radar control.
Because government cooperation is lukewarm, tower controllers and the Mexican Association of Pilots are seeking their own safe solution. A mid-air collision between a commercial aircraft and a UFO is a real possibility they must avoid. Sightings will continue to update you on further developments in Mexico City.
Sightings has expanded its America Online area. Keyword Sightings when you log on for access to sighting stories, images, and events. To subscribe to America Online, call 1-800-591-3344. And you can still reach Sightings 24 hours a day at 1-900-933-7444.
Until next time, remember, no mystery is closed to an open mind. For Sightings, I'm Tim White.
Next on Sci-Fi, Dark Shadows.
My name is Darian Fox, and I'm still the government's see-through guy. We go out and we get the bad guys, the bad girls, and runaway science projects, and they still never see it coming.
The Invisible Man, a Sci-Fi original series. Disappearing Fridays at 8 on Sci-Fi.